Hey everyone, welcome back to another very quick short update on kwyll development. As I said in the last video, I'm going to try and do these more regularly and slightly shorter just to keep things moving as we approach the release. So a few things changed since the last one, which was just over a week ago. Lots and lots of fixes, which I won't go into detail of, but I'll go into the reason behind those fixes and why they were found and why the bugs were found and how they were found, and why I'm focusing a lot of effort on that side at the moment. There's a lot of optimizations I'm putting into place now, both in terms of how much memory it uses on the spectrum to free up as much of that as possible for the game, and in terms of performance and general optimizations. So I might go into a little bit more detail on those as we go through, but as I said before, I'll try and focus most of the time on changes that happen in the editor that you can see that show a little bit better on video. So if I go quickly to the current version, my current version anyway, I'll show you. I've got a list here of things that have significant things that have changed. So a lot of it's around logic, and again, the reason for these changes has in many cases been due to, or for the same reason that I've been doing the fixes. So I'll get into those in a moment, or we'll get into that reason in a moment. So if we go to our game logic tab where we can just play with some nodes. So the first thing is the direction node, which you may have used or seen in other videos. So the purpose of this node is to take in controller inputs. So this would typically come from you'd use a controller node, and you'd wire these directly into the left, right, and then the direction node does is it converts the inputs from the controller into a chosen output based on a priority. So if you're building an overhead view type character controller, you want to have maybe a different animation for when you're moving up and up or down, left and right. You can use this to do that very cheaply and very easily. So you'd have your animation numbers in here, and it can automatically choose vertical priority versus horizontal priority. So that's for if you're moving in diagonal, it has to choose one or the other. If you're going left and up, for example, it has to choose either left or up. So you can choose whether you want to prefer the vertical or prefer the horizontal in that case. So this has always allowed you just to choose which values you put in here. These wired in from the controller, and it will output one of these values depending on what direction you're primarily moving in. And then, as I say, you typically wire that into a set animation over here. Now, the problem that came up was if you're using animation 0 for one of your directions, this didn't work, because if none of the directions were being pressed, like none of the controller keys were being pressed or the joystick, the default output is 0. So if the default output is 0 and one of your left animation is 0, it proved problematic. So I've just added in here the ability to set a value that will be output if there is no direction held. So you might, for example, if you're using 0 as your left, 1, 2 and 3 as your animations, you can't use that. So you can either set it to -1 and then detect that further on in your logic, or you can set it to something else that you might have an idle, for example, on animation 4 or 5. So that allows you to control that a little bit more cleanly. So that's the first one. The next one is another new node. So we've always had and or, and the astute among you might notice a slight change in those, but now we've also got not. So this just basically takes the value and returns the inverse of it, which is quite useful. But the other change here, so the new is not, the not is new, but the change in all three of these is this flag for mode. I'm not sure logical is going to be the final name, but what it basically means is these nodes can operate as bitwise and or not, or Boolean and or not. So if they're in Boolean mode, any non-zero value is considered true and 0 is considered false. So it allows you to do Boolean ands for things like, or and or for things like if you're getting the input from an int comparison. The output from this is going to be 1 or 0 if the comparison succeeds or fails. So you put that into there, and then you can do it. You can compare two, for example, and bring them in. And if you switch that into logical mode, it will just compare whether the input is non-zero or 0. It doesn't matter what the actual value is. If, however, you switch it in, if you switch off logical mode, it operates in bitwise mode, which means it'll take the 16-bit integer on the way in and on A and B in the case of and it will do a bitwise and on the two input values, so that the output value will have bits 0 through 15 set if both if they're set in both A and B, and similarly for or. If or not, will do a bitwise inversion of the input value, and if it's in logical mode, it will take a Boolean value of 1 for true or non-zero for true and 0 for false, and output the 0 or 1 opposite. So that's quite useful. As I say, I'm not sure whether it's going to stay as logical or Boolean or something, but for now that's how they work. So that's 2 in 1, and the next one I'll load a file to show how this one works, because I've done some tests. So one of the things that this again came from the same source, if you like, for the bugs and some of the other things. So there's some guys doing some work in the Discord on some projects, and this sort of came up when I was looking at what they were doing. It seems like a common pattern to want to do certain logic operations not at full speed. So at the always node, for example, if we just bring up an always node, so you can see the change here. The always node, as up until now, it will execute the code that comes out of here every single frame, no matter what. And if you wanted to, let me put that back actually. If you wanted to do something only every fifth frame, for example, you'd have to create a variable. You'd have to have initialize to set the variable to 0 at the start. Then you'd have to do an if and check if the value is what you want. So if, say for example, we only want to do whatever we're going to do down here every fifth frame, you check if it's 5. If it is, you do it. If it's not, you have to do a change variable counter by 1 and then carry on. Otherwise, over here you can do whatever you want to do. And if it is 5, you always have to then set the variable back to 0 so that it does it the next 5. So it's all this just to do a countdown effectively of calls, so that it would only execute the rest of this on the 5th time through. So all of that is now eliminated. You don't need that anymore. You can delete all of that because the inclusion of this skip here, which basically does it internally. So if I do that now, that's exactly the same as all that logic I'd done before. So it just makes it a lot easier. It's a very simple feature. It doesn't give you a lot of control over. You can't get access to the value of the frame counter. It's because none of the code will run if the frame counter isn't the chosen number. So it's just a very simple replacement for that exact case, which it seems to be quite common. So just an example of how it works, I'll show you here. So I've got a simple movement of an object, a player object, the standard character, just moving between two Y positions, but every 50 frames. So if it's running at normal speed, it should be about every second. So if we go to the preview and run that, you can see it just moves up and down every second. And if I change that number to 10, for example, again, it runs faster. So it's just a very simple way to achieve that delay effect on the always, which, as I say, seems to be quite common, and it's potentially a huge saving in terms of the size of the program going out in terms of VM code. So that's the main changes. As I say, there's been a lot of fixes and a lot of optimizations. I've started again on the work converting the C code, which the engine on the Spectrum side is largely still in C, converting that into assembly and hand optimizing it for space and speed, and I'm seeing significant results on that. So I've started on some of the common things, like there's a routine that gets run every time you create an object, whether it's in the room or in the map or a dynamic object using the spawn. It has to go through a construction routine, which sets up the sprite and sets up various other things, and I've moved that into a Z80 and saved 2/3 of the space just by hand coding it in Z80. So it was 480 odd bytes, and I saved 2/3 of that. So it's all worthwhile, and I'm going to move through and continue optimizing those functions as I go. Lots of fixes, as I say, both in the editor and in the Spectrum. I won't go into details on those, but I will explain a little bit about what's driving them. So I've introduced a new channel in Discord for those of you who aren't there yet. If you want to come and join, I'll put the link in below. It's free to join the Discord and come along and join the conversation. But I've added a new forums-based channel in there where people can put their projects that they're working on. There's a couple already on there. I'll show some pictures, one side or the other in a moment, of some of the work that people are doing, just to show how interesting it is, how cool some of the things that the early access users are doing, what they're doing with kwyll at the moment. But it's a way to sort of start a conversation on a particular project. So each project has its own thread, it has its own section within the channel, where you can go to show off what you're doing. If you're working on a particular project that you're proud of and you want to just show it off, that's fine. If you want to get some feedback, ideas on look, feel, that's also cool. If you want to go in and maybe get some help, so if you can post your project, you can post the source code, the actual project file for your project, and some of the other users on the Discord can then maybe help you out if you're getting a bit stuck. So this is a good way to actually share some of the projects and share some of the experience and knowledge that people are building now as they start to use it more. And I'll always be diving in to help out if I can, if people are having problems trying to do a particular thing. So that's where most of the bugs have come from. So a lot of performance issues have come from this. The Manic Miner cavern example in particular has highlighted some serious performance issues, not entirely unexpected on the Spectrum, but it's a good test case, because it literally does everything that particular level of Manic Miner does. It's got the collapsing floors, it's got the moving enemies, it's got the things that you hit to die, it's got the flashing keys, all things that kwyll can do but hasn't really been exercised up until now, until this project has started. So it's a really good test bed to actually try and work out where the performance bottlenecks are going to be, and that's where I'm spending a lot of time at the moment, looking at both the code generation, how it generates the output that goes onto the Spectrum, and also the code that runs on the Spectrum, to see if there's ways to do things more efficiently, and also to try and offer better ways of doing it at a higher level. So one example is the flashing keys. They're done as objects with logic to change the colour rapidly, and the conveyor as well is a set of tiles, and they're changed using the tile modification logic node regularly, and obviously that's very costly in terms of performance and size for that matter. So one of the things that's come out of it is to look into providing some sort of very simple low cost way of animating tiles. So that's what I'm working on now. I'm looking at that. There's a discussion going on the Discord if anyone wants to come along and offer any thoughts on that topic. but the idea will be to provide a very simple way that allows you to animate simple tiles in the background without needing logic to do so. And that's come out of these projects. So again, I recommend you, if you haven't already joined the Discord, pop along and say hi and take a look at some of these projects. I think that's it for this time round. Again, I'm going to try and keep these things going on a regular basis, so I should be back within about a week to 10 days with more updates, hopefully some animated tiles to show. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications so that you get to see when I produce more of these videos, and pop over to the Discord and join the discussion, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.